In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military bases and chemical plants may be advised to evacuate.
Hello, Sublation Media viewers. It's I, Douglas Lane, author of Bash Bash Revolution and Wave of Mutilation and The Sea Monkey Conspiracy, which is a short story I wrote back in around 2002. I'm the head of Sublation Media, and you are?
I'm Ashley Frawley. I'm a sociologist at the University of Kent. I'm part of the Sublation Media team, and I've published over 100 articles. I got to count on them now. And here's my most recent book. Here it is. Where if you sign up on my Patreon at $15, you get a free copy. So I guess it's not really free, but you also get all my podcasts and all my content. There's just a review of this actually that just came out in the London School of Economics literary review, whatever, and it was really good. My heart was pounding. I saw it come up. I went, oh no. You know, they always say nice things, and then at the end they give the critique, right? So I was like, okay, all nice things. She didn't really understand the argument. That's cool. It's okay. She likes what she understood. And I get down to the end. It's like, okay, here's the critique. She says her language is a bit difficult, and I was like, well, do you know, of all the things that I was worried she was going to say, she said that my language was just a bit difficult, which is actually quite a critique because I do try very hard to be clear. And it's just I think that sometimes when you are not clear, it's because you're struggling with the ideas yourself and you're struggling to put them into words that anyone can understand. And it's a sign of, you know, knowing your subject really well when you can do that. And because, you know, these are new ideas and research that I've been doing for a while. And I was struggling really hard to kind of put it all into this like world historical context and this sort of thing. It was quite difficult. But if I were to write it, you know, now I can explain it clearly, you know, 2 years out from the actual writing of the book, although it just came out. But yeah, at the time it was quite hard. And if I were to write like a popularized version, like a trade version, which I've been asked to do, it would be a lot more accessible. But it is a really deep study of our contemporary obsession with emotion. Our contemporary obsession.
Yeah, I was going to say, real quick, summarize what the book is and tell people where they can get it.
Right. So you can go on to the Bloomsbury, page and just buy it there. You can get it on Amazon, or you can go on my Patreon and get it from me. Right. So the book is about why we are so obsessed with understanding social problems as emotional problems. And I go through in particular why we are so obsessed with making seemingly positive mental health phenomena, positive emotions into social problems, because they don't seem immediately problematic. So how does that happen? And why do we keep telling the same story over and over again? So I go through self-esteem to happiness, to well-being, to mental health, and I look at mindfulness as a kind of minor fad within it. So I look at our positive emotional fads. Why do we keep setting up things like happiness, mental health, well-being as social problems? And I'd like to say I said, what can we do about it? But by the time I got to the last chapter, I was exhausted, and I am not sure that I had good solutions. But I did beg us to not to deflect all our social problems onto the human psyche. That human psychology is incredibly complex and vast, but so is society. And we need to make sense of that in order to make sense of social problems. And the problem is the problem is that once we become convinced that really every social problem comes down to our brains and behavior, when the solutions that are based on that don't work, we don't ask ourselves, oh, maybe we've misunderstood the problem. We think, oh, brains and behavior are more messed up than we thought. And we become even more heavy-handed. We have even less belief in freedom, even less belief in the human subject and the human ability to solve and understand our problems. So it becomes this sort of vicious cycle. So anyway, that's this problem. That's this book. And I'll put it nicely back onto my shelf.
Well, I want to jump right into the topic for the stream, because I've been trained by the YouTube gurus that you have to get right to it, or else people.
I know. I'm sorry, Doug. I thwarted you, but thank you for giving me the time to plug my book.
No. It's worthwhile, and we should do a whole episode just about significant emotions sometime soon. But I want to point out that today's episode, the reason I titled it the way I did was because I have decided, it looks to me as though we have now reached the moment where the pro-Palestine left movement, the anti-imperial left movement, has concluded, has been defeated. It's at its end. And the reason I say that is because the emphasis on Biden has allowed the Democrats to move the goalposts and to recapture the left progressive Democrats who were dissatisfied with Biden's approach to the Israeli-Palestine conflict. I have a bunch of things I've written down to say, and if you'll forgive me, I'm just going to jump in and say them. So to begin with, today, Tim Walz from Minnesota has been selected as the VP pick for Kamala Harris's campaign. I myself would have preferred Shapiro was picked because I think it would have been a clarifying pick for those who were on the pro-Palestinian left. But that's not what the Kamala Harris campaign chose to do. They did not directly refute the uncommitted campaign or spurn that faction or bloc within the Democratic Party. And I can see why they didn't do that. Picking Walz was a better choice if they were concerned about the progressive Democrats as a voting bloc. So I think they probably were. It's a close race. Progressive who casts uncommitted votes in the Democratic primaries this spring indicated that this is a quote actually from a Jewish website that is was tracking the VP pick, and they said progressives who cast uncommitted in the Democratic primaries this spring indicated that they would be happier if Walz was picked. They pointed to his remarks on CNN after 19% of the Democratic electorate in the state's presidential primary participated in the protest vote. Quote, they are asking to be heard, and that's what they should be doing, Walz said. Their message is clear that they think this is an intolerable situation and that we can do more. And I think the president is hearing that. So Walz responded to the uncommitted votes in the primaries, a primary that, by the way, was mostly just a charade, just theatrical. At that point, it had been made clear who the nominee was, or so we thought. And I want to point out that what Walz said, that that these protesters' concerns should be heard, did not represent a change from the stance of the Democratic Party from the beginning of the conflict. From the beginning of the conflict, the Democratic Party's approach to handling it was to go to different voting blocs and assure them that their concerns were going to be heard, that they could work through these differences, and that it was important to allow people to express their concerns. And that's what Walz said as well. That, of course, didn't change what the policy was, but rather it was a matter of simply kind of reassuring, petting the various blocks so that they would remain within the fold. It's also worth reminding ourselves at this point who the major players in the pre-Palestine movement are. One of them is the PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. That's one major player. The other is the DSA, maybe. A splinter that one, PSL, is a splinter group from the World Workers' Party. And the World Workers' Party was behind the Answer Coalition, which was one of the major organizers of the anti-war movement 20 years ago during the lead up to the war in Iraq. They spearheaded the Not in Our Name movement that led the protests against the war then. And they are amongst those who organized the protests against the bombardment of Gaza today. Of course, the easy critique here is to notice that the big demos 20 years ago led nowhere but to the Democratic Party in the election of Obama. And for as much noise as there was on Twitter, the pro-Palestine protests were significantly smaller and had less traction with the masses say than the Not in Our Name anti-Iraq protest had 20 years earlier. We should remember that the Uncommitted campaign was a small and polite pressure campaign on Biden that threatened to withhold votes from Biden in swing states unless he stopped funding Israel's war machine. And today, the Uncommitted will be more committed because they have had their victory and they can see their influence on the party. So a lot of the people who were part of the Uncommitted campaign, the progressive Democrats, were very vocal online and in various ways made their opinion known that Waltz was their choice. And now they've had that victory. Waltz was selected. 2 months ago, I released a video entitled How to Oppose Israel and Defend Palestine. It included an explanation of Paul Piconi's notion of artificial negativity, an idea that was developed out of Marcuse's arguments in One-Dimensional Man. And it was a critique of the protest movement. I want to run a clip from that video again now, because this is my I told you so moment. So here it is. The miseducation of the young is having consequences today, as it has helped to create a protest movement that is artificial, that will only return the protesters to the village. As the people of Gaza face Israeli bombers targeting the very refugee centers where over 1 million non-combatants were directed to shelter, students have risked their academic and professional futures by protesting in solidarity, which is why it is all the more necessary to examine this protest movement critically. On May 6, 2024, Politico reported that even as pro-Palestinian protesters have dubbed President Biden Genocide Joe, the groups behind the demonstrations have received financial backing from Democratic Party operatives, specifically Jewish Voice for Peace, if not now, within our lifetime, the Working Families Party, the Westchester Peace Action Committee Foundation, the National Students for Justice in Palestine Group, and many others have all received funding from the Tides Foundation, a dark money operation that Democratic Party donors use to skirt campaign finance laws. Maintaining artificial negativity is an end in itself for the progressive capitalist state, directing and redirecting the dissatisfaction that quite naturally arises within the young, the unemployed or underemployed, and even the relatively comfortable middle classes back into dependency is the overall goal. This explains why the student protest movement has remained ideologically trapped within a Schmittian friend-enemy politics of fragmentation and impossibilism. The demand that Israel dismantle itself as an illegitimate occupier of indigenous lands cannot be realized and has instead led to more moderate and practical demands. For instance, the demand that universities divest from companies with ties to Israel. But this will have no short-term consequence. In fact, according to the sociologist David Meyer, they are unlikely to ever have a direct financial impact.
If you want to strangle the companies that are invested in Israel, when the firm that's holding these stocks sells them, somebody else is going to buy them. Historically, divestment movements haven't made much direct financial impact on the companies. They're more important as the basis of a political campaign, raising awareness and spurring political action, encouraging people to do other things besides divestment.
Myers goes on to say that what's more important than the divestment is the cultural impact, the artistic expression that emerges from the divestment efforts.
It was also accompanied by, this artistic boycott. And if you go through YouTube, you can find a song, a collective song called Ain't Gonna Play Sun City, the artistic boycott, that was written by Steve Van Zandt, Bruce Springsteen's guitarist. And it's a bop. It works. So there's a lot of things going on besides divestment. The kind of brilliance of divestment as a strategy is that it allows young people to connect their lives to the political cause they care about and to have something to do that seems like it matters.
As difficult and counterintuitive as it seems, student protesters should be asking themselves what future political campaigns they're being shepherded into. Who is planning on using the energy created by the strictly cultural rejection of Zionism? In the 1980s, Bruce Springsteen and the Artists United Against Apartheid raised awareness and supported the Democratic Party. Springsteen, along with the rest of the pop establishment, supported Bill Clinton in 1992. However, despite rhetorical differences, the Democrats and Republicans had largely behaved in the same way towards South Africa, obeying the UN embargo against arming the apartheid state only to the degree that it was convenient or thought to be in the national interest. JFK, for example, made promises to stop selling arms to South Africa with a proviso that this promise could be broken if circumstances necessitated arming South Africa in response to communist aggression. Carter's embrace of the embargo was presaged by the Ford administration's, and specifically Kissinger's, enforcement of the ban. All in all, U.S. geopolitical policies are led by pragmatism and not ideology. The U.S. reacts to the world and always tries to cover its bets.
Any word of what we're heading for?
I hear it's San Marcos.
We fighting for or against the government?
CIA's not taking any chances this time. Some of us are for, some of us are going to be against them.
Oh.
And the same thing is true domestically. The Democrats and the Republicans always try to have things every which way and don't worry about consistency. What this means for the protesters is that they are being led back into the Democratic Party and will be supported or suppressed for pragmatic rather than ideological reasons. The solution for Palestinians is well known, as is the impossibility of enacting it.
Okay, Doug, your microphone is muted. All right, so there were.
All right, I'm sorry about that. There were comments during that, and one of them was that my microphone wasn't loud enough. Am I louder now?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds perfectly fine to me, so I'm not really sure what you're hearing. But I don't know if it's just my headphones all right, but it sounds fine to me. I turned my microphone down. Perhaps I was just too loud and exuberant. Anyway, okay, so there was a comment in the chat during that clip where someone said, "Look, Doug, this is too much theoretical jargon. I am simple. Can you explain it for me simply?" So the message was that which you reiterated at the end, the protesters are being led back to the Democratic Party. But could you kind of give us a rundown of what are you trying to get across?
Sure. Well, the idea of the pro-Palestine movement was from the start, to put pressure on the Biden campaign to change U.S. policy so that there were two demands. One was defund and the other was divest, right? So by making those kinds of demands of the Biden administration, any other Democrat, I thought at the time, that might come along, not now, but in like 4 years after Biden either won a second term or lost, would be able to differentiate himself from the symbol of those policies without really changing the policies. One of the other problems that the pro-Palestinian movement had was that they didn't understand what the Biden administration's policy actually was and why it was the way that it was. And I'm not entirely sure the degree to which the Biden administration's understanding of the necessity to support Israel could be claimed to be actually in the national interest. But that was the reason behind their continued support for Israel. The option would have been to walk away from Israel and to allow Iran and Hamas to go to war on an ally, and thereby be seen as weak, right? And to at the same time lose influence in the region overall. And so because of that wasn't a live option for them. There was the whole point of Biden's approach to Israel was to try to use their influence to contain the conflict. What they wanted was some sort of show of force in Gaza and a negotiated peace and a return to normal so that the Abraham Accords could continue and the United States could continue to have influence over a variety of client states, including ultimately even Iran. So if you understood what the U.S. aim was, then the demand to defund would have been a non-starter, because unless you can develop a political force within the United States that could achieve different conditions internationally, unless you had an alternative to U.S. influence in the region, some other political force that was organizing internationally that could lead in a positive direction. In other words, without a working class movement in the United States that was independent of the Democrats, a working class movement in Israel that was independent of Netanyahu, a working class movement in Palestine that was independent of the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, you weren't going to be able to make any headway in terms of changing the actual conditions there, and all you would have is a variety of bad options and different tactical considerations or strategic approaches. I mean, like, the big difference between Biden and Trump isn't the amount of support that they're going to give to Israel ultimately, but on what basis? The peace through strength approach of Trump, the return to Reaganism, the idea that, not only will we support Israel, but we'll smash you to bits if you cross us, is an alternative approach to the more gentle, humanistic approach of the Biden administration, which wanted to say, we, of course, support our allies, but we care deeply about all the dead bodies that are stacking up in Gaza,
Right.
and we weep, right? But the reality is the funding would be the same either way, but the rhetoric would be different. And the hope of the Trump administration would be, by being a big, strong man who's going to threaten everyone and not show a hint of remorse, that maybe that will help to create quiescence in Iran and in Gaza, and then peace could emerge through strength. That's the alternative to the Biden approach. But they're basically the same in terms of what kind of outcome they want. So, and by the way, that's ultimately, I think, the outcome that the pro-Palestine movement appeared to want by making the demands that they made. They wanted to return to normal, and while washing their hands of the situation, it was a return to like the stance of 20 years ago, which was the not in our name movement. So
Okay, so I can imagine that people would be critical of this and say, well, what evidence do you have that people have really fallen in line? Just because
on the left.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, there's a couple of, not everyone, of course, will be happy, and there's going to be the most committed, radical, pro-Hamas, anti-imperial types that will want to press on. But the fact is that the mass movement relied upon funding from the Democratic Party to really take hold and to have whatever level of mass support that it had. So really, what I would expect to see is that the pro-Palestine movement will be marginalized in the name of supporting Kamala Harris and her new pro-Palestine VP, Tim Walz.
And when you say pro-Palestine, you mean sort of in terms of tears and prayers?
Yes, exactly. Pro-Palestine in terms of like, we hear your pain. You know, we want to give it, and these leftists who are out there protesting are good people. They're not anti-Semites. They're legitimately concerned. The gesture of support it will be enough to, I think, suppress any further mass protests. Like the test might be how big of a protest will there be at the DNC. I'll find out. I'm going to go. But if if there isn't a disruption at the DNC, a major one, we can we'll be able to see that the pro-Palestine faction within the Democratic Party has been subdued, and I think it's already clear that they have been subdued, and so I'm not even saying it would be a better outcome if they weren't. I'm just saying, on their own terms, the pro-Palestine movement has failed. But the other thing to consider, I have some other notes here, but go ahead. Ask another. Go ahead.
Okay, well, put a pin in that. So someone asked or suggested that perhaps part of the reason why the wind has been out of the sails or been taken out of the sails is because the algorithm has stopped promoting division and so on, and basically just stop promoting the topic. Is it that it's no longer on the agenda? It's just, those who have the ability now, agenda setting relies on algorithms to a certain extent, I suppose. I don't know. I'd have to go and review the literature on that one. But I mean, it seems that people do seem to say or have noticed that the algorithm will promote certain kinds of content. And if maybe it's a tinfoil hat point of view, but I don't know. We're all kind of talking about culture war stuff about women boxing or not women boxing. And, we're like teetering on the edge of conflict, a major regional conflict that could easily, bubble into something more. And our attention all seems to be elsewhere. Is that a tinfoil hat thing? Or is it that the algo is kind of stopped promoting? Well, and that the algorithm has stopped promoting that content? Or is it perhaps that, people have just fallen in line? They've kind of said, okay, well, this is a bandage over the issue. And so we can maybe rest easy now for a bit.
I think that during at the height of the pro-Palestinian protests and that movement, the algorithmic suppression was underway already. Like there was notable efforts by Facebook and Google and other social media platforms to suppress the views of those who were pro-Palestine. And there was, efforts within the Congress to suppress the protest on the basis of hate speech laws and striking out at anti-Semitism. So I don't have any more information where I would be able to say, despite the appearance of the suppression through the algorithms of those views before, it's gotten worse now. I just don't know. But I suspect that, well, I just don't know. I don't know the degree to which the algorithmic suppression of views has intensified around this issue.
I don't know. I mean, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, the algorithm has an interest in eyeballs, right? That's the main thing. People would often say this about the media, that the media promotes this and that. And it's absolutely true that, there is a certain amount of pressure that can come from above, not to say certain things or to watch your language about certain things. But at the end of the day, they want eyeballs, particularly like more heterodox media. And so the degree to which an algorithm can really be or would be suppressing things to the extent that it would hurt the bottom line is questionable. I mean, if it gets a lot of eyeballs, then it gets the people going. Then that's it's going to bias in that particular direction. But who knows? Perhaps things go deep. I do know that. I mean, Musk at least claimed that a lot was happening behind the scenes. That he didn't say much about it, but that affirmed the tinfoil hat theories. Okay, so the other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to ask you a little bit more about was you said that without a working class movement capable of kind of pressuring from below, and without a similar kind of movement on the other, on the other side, nothing could happen. But it seems like too much is being taken for granted there. Obviously we would say that with our politics, but why is that necessary? Why would that be any more effective?
Well, from my point of view at this moment, without an attempt to organize from below independently of both parties, any attempt to be political will be sidelined, manipulated, controlled, framed in such a way as to be extremely limited, and so on. So the necessity for independence from both parties, true independence from both parties, I think is clearer than ever. And the way you can think about that is just to think about how we got Kamala Harris as the nominee. I had some quotes from the Seymour Hersh article that he wrote about how Kamala Harris became the nominee, and it was all insider pressure and had nothing to do with any movement from below. I mean, there was maybe some expression one way or the other from below, but there was nothing democratic about it, and there was no way to organize around it. The process of selecting the nominee was not at all democratic and was run by elites. And I think that we can see clearly in this moment that, for instance, something like the Uncommitted campaign was a charade because it was taking place within the context of a completely controlled and manipulated process of selection. So I mean, I could go over some of the details here about how Biden was
I
forced
just
out.
think it's quite simple. We never had a wine mom president, and she's the wine mom president. Do you know okay, sorry, we will get back to your very serious points, but I did want to say, I do remember during COVID, there was this young woman who was doing these lip sync videos of political figures from various clips. And one of them was she had I think she was making fun of Priti Patel, but she had a bottle of, I don't know, vodka or something and a cigarette. And she was like, and what are you doing? And it was like an actual press conference. And and it was synced up perfectly. She's like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me. That's hilarious. And I desperately want to take one of those Kamala Harris speeches and be like,
No, right. Well, okay, on that level, just for a moment.
I can relate as a wine mom myself,
Yeah. Recently, RFK Jr. had to come forward and try to do some damage control because a New Yorker piece was about to be published that discussed how he took the dead body of a bear cub and left it in Central Park. And so he got his version of the story out first on video in an interview he did with Roseanne Barr. And that kind of went a little viral. And it's a very odd story. And it, he's saying, well, I saw someone hit a bear cub, and it was dead. And I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity for me because I can take that bear cub and skin it, and I can cook the meat. And so I put it in my van. And I didn't listen to the whole story, but he ended up not taking it home to skin and cook, but just leaving it in Central Park. And it was just such an odd story of something he did when he maybe just a decade ago or less than that, that he came off as quite strange. But it was strange enough that it was entertaining. And then people took pictures of it and created alternative stories for him to be telling, I forget the details now, but it was just various weird stories from pop culture that he might have been involved with. And I thought, oh, this could become the next coconut meme campaign. I mean, RFK Jr. through this Bear Cub story could grab everyone's attention, go really viral, and maybe get a big bump in the polls. Who knows? Because just about anything that's at all relatable enough to hold your attention, can become a jumping off point for politics at this point.
American culture is very good at that, throwing up just the most deranged characters because they are characters. They get people's attention. That's you know, you don't get people's attention being boring, exact, precise. You know, I've talked about this before. Whenever I talk to people about like going in the media, you know, writing things or speaking to television, they'll say like, "Oh, well, you know, I'm not, you know, the number one expert in this particular thing." And unfortunately, I have to say, yeah, you don't have to be. In fact, you shouldn't be. The number one expert in any particular area is not on TV because they're boring AF, you know, and they can't communicate ideas in a clear and interesting way. What gets you onto television, what gets you in the media, and especially into American politics, is you've got the X factor. You got that thing, that je ne sais quoi, that gets people going. And yeah, that's who rises to the top. And it's interesting because that happens in a lot of places. It's generally a part of sort of Anglosphere culture and probably elsewhere. I suppose. I'm trying to think of other countries that I have experience of. But when I go to America or I go to Canada and we have tons of American news, it is so in your face. Everything is in your face. It feels like a dystopian movie from like, I don't know, hundreds of years into the future. And here it is where everyone's totally insane. You know, like I go on Times Radio all the time and they had right before I went on one. So I'm like waiting for my time to go on. And they had an interview. And I was so embarrassed because I was thinking, oh no, my accent is the same as this person. I'm going to be tarred. You know, it's going to be guilt by association here. But this woman comes on. She's like, I think it's a political pundit comes on. And you could just tell because it was such it was just fish out of water, put it into the British context. And it was crazy. She goes, I think that it's very clear. It is undeniable that the failed Trump assassination shows that Trump has God on his side.
Mm-hmm.
And you just nodded. That's insane. You're just like, yeah, I hear that every Tuesday. No, you don't hear that. You don't hear that. And like as soon as the call was over, the two presenters started laughing because it was the most insane interview ever. That's American politics. And you were all just sitting there like, yeah, that's totally fine and normal. No, it's not fine and normal. That's how you get Trump for a president. I know. I'm sorry for the shallowness of my political analysis there, but I just find it.
Well, can I look? I want to say
Sorry.
something about how I interpret people when they say something like Trump had God on his side. I mean, I think a lot of them are probably literalists in their understanding of God, but another way to consider that is to think of it as an expression of some sort of faith in the revitalization of the United States that can't be stopped. That you know, it wasn't just luck, but retroactively it's fated for Trump to be put into the Oval Office and for him to achieve the goals that his base wants him to achieve, which most of all is simply to get us back on our feet, to get more jobs, to get more manufacturing in America, to stop the inflow of immigrants that they see as competing with native workers, and to be allowed to live without a lot of restrictions and controls from a state that they see as adversarial. So God's on our side, or God's on Trump's side, means we can win. That's how I interpret it. And, you know, so people express themselves.
No, she was saying it. No, she was saying it like it was divine intervention.
I know.
She was quite
I know.
clear.
Yes,
the fact that he turned his head at the last second was divine intervention.
Right. Well, look, there's a version of this on the left, right? There's a version of this in the mainstream in the center too. The one thing I heard was this demonstrates that we're living in a simulation. right? When Trump was elected, we were in the wrong timeline. It was the wrong universe. These are all different
Clearly.
forms of religious thinking, and we all have these forms of religious thinking. And just because someone's in a different church than you are doesn't make them really substantially crazier than you are. Like, to think, oh, we're in the worst timeline, which is sort of a joke, but there's some people who really believe it. Or like, we're all living in a simulation. This proves it. There's some people who really believe that, and not just like weirdos in their mother's basement, but like Nick Bostrom. Even someone like Robert Wright seems to flirt with the idea that it does demonstrate that it's true. So I just put that aside. The question is, like, for the left, not how crazy are these everyday people on the Trump side of the equation, but what do we want to do? How do we want to relate to capitalist politics? And do we want to be herded into a party that selected their candidate this way, and in such a way that was so obviously insulting to the base, to the voters within their own party? I mean, I'm not saying it was unconstitutional, but there were a variety of things to note about it, and that we should note that are going on right now. Like, since Kamala was selected, actually before she was selected, it was revealed by Jay Johnson, the former head of the DHS, that it didn't really matter who was president, because what mattered was who the president appointed to the various regulatory and security agencies. And right now, given the level of conflict that's going on in the world, the possibility of an attack on Israel from Iran, the way in which Israel's kind of broken off its leash and is acting without the support of the U.S. state, all of that's being handled by people like Anthony Blinken and others, while the president, I don't know what he's doing, and the Kamala campaigns. Like, while the president gets his sleep and Kamala campaigns, and we don't expect Kamala Harris to step forward and really speak to the issue, nor do we expect to hear from Joe Biden, who is not well enough to run, and by extension isn't well enough to really run the country. But we all kind of know that this is a charade either way, and that what matters is the way in which the state bureaucracy decides to handle these sorts of problems in the world. And we just hope that these anonymous people know what they're doing. And I don't think it will matter much who gets elected, either. But we should not just accept this either. And we're being invited to accept the death of politics, the death of politics from below, anyhow, as we endorse this or that symbolic choice, like the selection of the VP, on the basis of our so-called leftism, our progressive vision. So, I mean, not only is the pro-Palestinian movement dead at this moment, as it's being reabsorbed into the Democratic Party, but it is also just a reaffirmation of the death of the social democratic, Bernie Sanders style left movement that really has been gone for the last 4 years, but since at least 2021, so I guess the last 3 years, but now has confirmed itself just to be completely absorbed within the Democratic Party and willing to comment on and pretend as though these kinds of choices between Josh Shapiro and Tim Walz are significant.
So here's the thing that I find obvious, and it was actually one of the comments as well, that at the end of the day, you said it doesn't matter who gets elected. It's exactly right. All that you need is a reassuring face. You need a reassuring. That's what Keir Starmer is in the UK. He intentionally was as boring as humanly possible. That was the goal, because you had to send the message that, look, all this madness is over, you know, we're not gonna, yeah, all the madness is gonna carry on, but you're not gonna know about it. It's all right. You know, I'm gonna speak to you softly while I F you. That's my thing that I like to say. Terrible way of saying it. But that's what we kind of wanted. And so with Kamala, you've got this idea of, oh, well, you've got this identity politics kind of candidate. That's business as usual, but she needs to balance that out with the most boring white guy possible. Right? Because if you just went with the white guy, it's the same problem you had before. But you balance that out with somebody, you know, you've got Kamala, so she sends the message like, we're gonna win this. We're gonna win this culture war. But it won't be crazy. Don't worry. It'll be the thing that you've known since the 90s. Don't worry, politics is still dead. We're gonna do a few things here and there. We're going to, you know, Karl Popper, one of my favorite quotes, ironically, you know, piecemeal democratic change. That's it. That's all that we have forever and ever and ever and ever. Just little tweaks here, little tweaks there. The area for democratic debate is about this big, and that's where it should be. The adults are in the room. The technocrats are here. They know what to do. Sit back, relax, watch Friends. It'll be okay. And that's the kind of message of that kind of candidate. And that's why Trump inspires so much horror, because everybody is on the edge of their seat. You know, you can't, the whole point of all of these speeches and so on is to lull people into, you know, a sense of quiet kind of trust, or like, it's all right, we've got everything under control. Does Trump have everything under control? Absolutely not. What's he going to do tomorrow? You get the idea that he was just like saying whatever the hell came into his head at any given time. It was very, very disconcerting. And also, it was very hard to get anything done. Like, Trump could do the exact same thing that Biden did, right? But because he couldn't sell it, I mean, he could sell it to his own constituency, but because he couldn't sell it as something sort of boring and no big deal, because that's just not what Trump does, it makes it impossible to get anything done. In that way, he's kind of, and I'm not endorsing Trump here, but he's kind of a gift to democracy, because nobody can just sit back and be like, here, just take the keys. It's all right. You know, you have people saying God is on our side. That's going to, well, I don't know. Apparently it doesn't scare you guys, but I mean, that keeps you on your toes, right? Like, what?
Ashley, I've heard you talk about how you have dreams that you sometimes think are prophetic, and you know, there's a part of you that has, you know, real mystical.
That is for Patreon. That's for patrons only, Doug. What are you doing here? You're outing.
I'm sorry. But my point is that,
in all seriousness, I have I have a woo side, right? But it's totally silly and stupid, and I keep it in a little box over here. And there's the politics and rationality side, and there the twain shall meet. Like, I am fully materialist. I don't even attempt to, you know, some people, they have to like make religion make sense. I don't need to do that. I just don't do it. It doesn't come into anything.
In the United States,
like when you go to sleep at night.
In the United States, it is true that religion and politics are more intertwined, even as the United States is probably one of the most formally secular nations on earth. But you know, there's a division between religion and the state that may not exist. I don't think fully exist in the UK, for instance. I think they have an official state religion there. Am I wrong?
Technically, but it's incredibly secular, much more secular than the United States, I think.
Right. They're more refined about how they blend the state with religion, you know. Of course, yeah, we still have a king, but it's not a real, you know, don't be so crude as to actually worship him. We just keep him around and give him a role in government. But the point is, like,
it's not for the tourists. It's just for the tourists.
In the United States, the religious community is a voting block that you have to court. There are people who care about their religion as a part of their life there, and you have to get them to vote. So yeah, they'll say things in terms of religion, but it is not that they are more insane than anyone else. It's just that they express their politics through this means, through the religion. Yeah.
But what,
so anyway,
and
I feel like that I'm gotten to this point, like, I'm going to defend America against all these Eurotrash.
I know. I forgot
UK.
about that. I'm just kidding around, right? Like I'm just poking.
I
That's
know,
what we
I know.
Canadians and
Well, I'm
Americans.
kidding
just,
back.
poke fun. But I saw in the comments people were getting like defensive, and I was like, "Oh right, I forgot. Americans are proud of being American." Because that's the thing. Canadians were like, "Yeah, we are idiots, aren't we? My God." Anyway,
I'm not actually. Let me just put it this way: I'm not actually proud of my state or of being an American, but there are aspects to American life that I see slipping away that I feel like I need to be demonstrably proud of now, in a way that maybe 20 years ago I would not have been at all. Like, like the First Amendment or the separation of powers in the government, or the role of the states, even that these things are imperfect, sometimes dysfunctional, but are at least one way in which there's been a limit placed on how much influence the state can have over everyday people's lives, and more importantly, a way in which the state has to allow for politics to emerge from society rather than the politics of the state dominating society. And that's, really, it's a small, like, weak pillar to stand on. Like there's not a lot of room for independent politics right now. It's more controlled than ever, from my perspective. But nonetheless, at least the idea of it is built into our government here. Oh, I lost Ashley. But so well, since she dropped probably because of internet, I want to go over some of the things that I didn't quite get to when I was presenting my case, and it's just around the way in which Kamala Harris was put into became the nominee. And it's worth noting that according to Seymour Hersh, who I believe has 65%, 75% chance of being roughly right. A key factor in the decision to force Biden out of office was by invoking the 25th Amendment. And the reason that happened was because of the negative polls reflecting that Biden was probably going to lose to Trump. So that on that basis, they threatened him with the 25th Amendment. And they told him that Harris would bring that to the Congress if he didn't step down voluntarily. So I think the point of understanding that story, or if it's true, is that these were people who were putting their own party's needs ahead of the public quite openly. If Biden could be taken out by the 25th Amendment, if they could show that he was not capable of being president, and they did not do so on the basis of what was in the interest of the public, but only threatened him with that as kind of blackmail to get him to step aside because of the needs of the party, well, that demonstrates the corrupt character of the party. The other thing I wanted to point out, someone said that Woodrow Wilson had a stroke while he was in the White House and his administration didn't miss a beat or a bit. And I wonder to what extent that was publicly known at the time. I mean, we're put in a position of being asked to accept that the president was incapacitated and that he's still in office. So we're supposed to deal with the cognitive dissonance of that. So I think this is slightly different. The other big difference is that at the time, the Socialist Party of America didn't accept or embrace Woodrow Wilson. They weren't, debating his choices as if Woodrow Wilson was their president, but actually standing up in opposition to him directly, getting thrown in jail by him. So that's the kind of socialist left we need today, I think. Not one that's in jail necessarily, but one that was willing to see itself as separate from the establishment parties. There's one more comment here I want to address. Stan asks, when was the last time that the left influenced U.S. foreign policy? Well, it seems to me to be implicit in that comment, and maybe I'm wrong, but that the left has influenced U.S. foreign policy right now by influencing who Kamala Harris chose as the VP. If that's not what you're implying, then, forgive my assumption there. And I hope it isn't, because I do not believe that this is an example of the left influencing how the U.S. is going to behave in the world. Quite the opposite is a way in which the Democratic Party is using its ability to make decisions unilaterally in order to subdue and control potential opposition. It's a bear hug, and should be thought of that. And Kamala, or Kamala, someone's trying to correct my pronunciation of Kamala or Kamala, should be understood as the way in which the Democratic Party have already fulfilled what I suggested they were going to fulfill 2 months ago in that video essay. In other words, they have turned around the pressure campaign against their genocidal policies, and now can step forward as the party of the Palestinian movement without changing anything in terms of how they fund the war or what the aims of the U.S. policy is, or how the U.S. is going to operate in the world. So that would be my position. We didn't even get to MAGA communism in this half, and I also want to, in the second half, talk about Benjamin Studebaker and his essay in Sublation Magazine. He has a really good essay that gets under my skin. It's called A Critique of the Administrative State, which I would like to discuss in the second half, and maybe bring him on sometime soon to discuss. He was on recently. I don't want to oversaturate the channel with Benjamin Studebaker, but I like the guy. We get along, and he challenges me in interesting ways. So hopefully Ashley will get her internet back on. I know she was saying she's kind of low energy. Here she is. She says that we'll discuss her article in Unheard. Yeah, we'll discuss the MAGA Communism article that she got published in Unheard. It's very good, worth considering. And we'll see you in the Parrot Room, in the Patreon. And you know what? I'm going to put a link so that people who want to can join the discussion. I think this time what we'll do is, if Ashley is there, if she gets her internet back on, we'll do like 30 minutes on the MAGA communism, and then open it up for people to come in and join the conversation. So, thanks everyone for watching this stream. I hope that I've been sufficiently a downer and contrarian, and we'll see you over on Patreon.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets